And to that exact end, in this article, we will be discussing a larger artifact, a much larger discovery, and a much larger engraving with that exact name. A name much like I already showed you on that huge birthing billboard, but even better than that. An actual size engraving, if you consider the actual size of the feet and hand. Not only that, but an even earlier engraving, at least 40 years earlier than that lead artifact above, with that sadly abbreviated name. And not only will we be discussing a larger and earlier engraving, but also discussing its marginally earlier prototype. What? Yes, a prototype, which was in essence a practice sketch of the divine name on a lesser iPad. iPad? What do you mean by that? Oh yeah, an iPad, you get it. iPad, dig it? iPad, right. Just slightly before this glorious engraving on a greater surface. Surface. I'll show you the surface. Oh, yeah. A quite remarkable upgrade, actually. I don't have a remarkable. An upgrade where we even get to see this glorious engraving signed by the author and signed by a footprint. So there you actually have double confirmation of Hebrew identity now, or double confirmation times 2 to be more accurate. Yes, there you have an exponential foothold to stand on, dear reader. How's that for epigraphic evidence and for mathematical evidence? Now, without further ado, here is my original photo of that rock-solid engraving in 2021. Followed by a photo of its very prototype in 2021, taken by my dear friend and fellow explorer Joseph Cheatham, less than a stone's throw away. Yes, prototype. Looks like mere chicken scratches on that rock, right? With a providential bird dropping to boot. But I can assure you that this is much, much more than that. Folks, this is Paleo-Hebrew. If not pure, undiluted Proto-Hebrew. And even that earlier crapshoot should be worth way more than $1 million to any pious Hebrew. Worth more than any fake Ten Commandment tablet. With the final creation in our preceding page being simply priceless. Yes, priceless to anyone with any sense of piety. And indeed, the content of these inscriptions is far more stunning than that on the legendary Gezer calendar, the calendar that Woolston gushes so much about. And unlike that much later geezer, this guy was a true artist. In comparison, that other geezer was just a dabbler with a Sharpie, just a tagger with a sputtering spray can. Having said all that, if those above engravings are in fact forgeries, then they're awfully, awfully good ones. Awfully good forgeries in a most unlikely place. Most unlikely forgeries since they are not earning anyone any money or notoriety whatsoever. So where is the motivation, right? Well-worn forgeries if that were the operative case. Imagine artificially wearing down this basalt rock, the very same as all those other engraved rocks around there. Next to impossible, huh? It would take better technology than we currently have. since we don't even know how that desert varnish was created in the first place. Sort of like those pyramids. Incidentally, many of those unattractive rocks are of the very same type as those found on top of Old Smoky, which is a black basalt found on top of Mount Sinai. Rocks typical of volcanic action, but more profuse in this area. Rocks that likely came from the nearby mountain, perhaps migrating via a massive flood, or perhaps humanly transported there as some sort of memorial. Since humans did that sort of transporting back then, they had strong backs. And yes, there are a lot of engraved rocks at that location. This is not an isolated engraving at all. There are many more engravings yet to be uncovered and examined in this massive field of black rocks. I feel like I've only scratched the surface there. As someone once said, the fields are black unto harvest, or something to that effect. A field with numerous ancient engravings by numerous disparate and displaced people. Diaspora in a brutal and desperate land, a land with a daunting history. An incredibly rich field of history that I hope to be examining a little bit more in the future. Since, as you are about to see in this present article, the rocks cry out his praise. They cry out both metaphorically and literally, such as the typology of Moses striking a rock and water gushing out as a result. So, in the above picture, we see that giant field of basalt rocks, about a mile away from the recently rediscovered split rock. That wonderful water-gushing rock of Exodus 17. A 71-foot tall monzonite rock discovered by pivotal explorers Jim and Penny Caldwell. Rediscovered in an area that the Bible names as Rephidim, a very special rock about 20 kilometers northwest of Mount Sinai. Yes, the actual Mount Sinai in northwestern Saudi Arabia. Go figure, huh? A rock that the great geologist Glenn Fritz considers just your typical hoodoo rock. A rock that was pushed to the surface within the last million years or so. Squeezed to the surface like a teenage zip. The tectonic plates and all that fun stuff that geologists like to ruminate on with their X-ray vision. With Fritz contending that the actual split rock of this Exodus chapter is a massive cinder cone over 100 kilometers southeast of Mount Sinai instead. A flattened cone that is not split in the least. A boring cone with zero validating artifacts. However, as you will see, these artifacts presented above both vindicate and validate this as the correct location instead. And to that gushing end, you may say that this paleo rock of our discussion is totally provenanced, is totally validated by context, rather than merely being provenienced by location. Totally provenanced by a secondary event that occurred near the split rock. Which essentially means that this provenanced eulogy is totally fortuitous and totally legitimate. Maybe. You see, all scholars rely heavily on that ambiguous qualifier. Mays and mights, perchances and perhapses. Much like the hilarious ambiguity of the late paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould. Yes, hilarious. Exaggerating just a wee bit, you say? Well, here is a recent example of paleontologist Saz's most learned ambiguity then. The data published so far makes the team's timeline a possibility, but by no means a certainty. He notes in an article in Live Science. Now, how is that for almighty science? Saying a whole lot of nothing. Sound a bit like Stephen J to you? Sound like proper science to you? So, can you actually give me some mathematical probabilities on this proposed timeline then? And exactly how much certainty then? Instead of pure opinion. Even Amazon can give me better probabilities on Asian shipping times. Now, is it possible that one of King Solomon's stonemasons chiseled out this long hidden inscription? Chiseled out this very subtle and very clever forgery some 500 years later? At a time when Solomon's delegates were allegedly in the area to set up a Red Sea crossing monument? Possible, but highly, highly unlikely. Since where would they get the esoteric knowledge of this considerably early Paleo-Hebrew? Their writing had evolved a great deal by then. Evolved in a Canaanite way, as you will see. Also, why would those stonemasons want to make those forgeries anyway? In order to claim some pathetic land that God clearly said would not belong to them? Not bloody likely, huh? 1 in a million chance at best. You see, the more you think about it, the worse your odds are getting. To repeat, this definitely is an earlier script. As you will see, it does correspond with the morphology of an even earlier script. So no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This was early Bronze Age script, not Solomon's Iron Age. Not only that, but the additional presence of pictographs is a solid indication of a much earlier period. This was pre-literacy for a whole lot of Hebrew folk, folks.